In an interview with Guitar Magazine in Japan, Jョンメイヤー said that he is planning to release his new album around his birthday in October 2027. That is very exciting. But what I wanted to talk about today is not just the news that Jョンメイヤー is releasing a new album. What I found very interesting was what he said in a recent podcast about songwriting and the mixed references he has been listening to. First, let's talk about songwriting. In the podcast, he talked about being deeply immersed in writing songs. It sounded like he is thinking about songs all the time, even when he is sleeping, even when he is eating. Somewhere in his mind, he is always working on music. One thing he said really stuck with me. It was something like, please don't get mad at the songwriter for looking at their phone during dinner. They might be writing lyrics. As a tiny little songwriter myself, I really relate to that. Sometimes my family gets mad at me for suddenly disappearing into my home studio. But I'm like, wait, I just came up with a melody. People who write songs in a way are always working. Of course, I'm not saying we don't need to value time with family and friends. That's not what I mean. But for some writers, the line between life and songwriting is not always clear. And the other thing I found interesting was what he said about mixing. The references he mentioned were The Joker by Steve Miller Band and Be Startin Somethin by Michael Jackson. First, The Joker by Steve Miller Band. What John was talking about was something like this. Are the cymbals too loud? Well, let me listen to The Joker. The cymbals are huge in the song, so maybe I can go that far. When you listen to the original version, the cymbals are really pretty loud. Normally, a mix with loud cymbals can be risky. The cymbals can stick out too much from the whole track. In modern mixing, I think cymbals are often controlled very carefully so they don't sound harsh or annoying. But in The Joker, the cymbals are pretty forward. And yet they don't sound unnatural. Actually, they fit that slightly rough, open, laid-back atmosphere of the song. The cymbals are loud, but the song still feels natural. I think that is a really interesting point. In other words, mixing is not just about making everything clean and perfectly organized. Even if the balance is a little bit odd, if it fits the atmosphere of the song, it can be the right choice. Actually, sometimes a slightly risky balance can become the character of the song. And the other reference was Be Startin Somethin by Michael Jackson. John said something along the lines of, every part in the song is pushed forward. And when you listen to it, you can really hear that. The rhythm, the bass, the guitar, the horns, the backing vocals. Everyone is making a statement. Every part is trying to stand out. That was one of the things John pointed out. Normally, when the main elements are pushed forward, the mix should become messy. But this song doesn't fall apart. Actually, that feeling of everyone coming forward becomes the energy of the song. It is not overly organized, but it is not chaotic either. Each part has its own presence, but as a whole it becomes one groove. I think that is an extremely advanced mix. When you are making music in a DAW, this kind of thing happens all the time, right? You make the bass sound powerful and you'll think, this sounds great. But then the textbook voice in your head says, no, the bass is too loud, turn it down. And you're like, okay, fine, I guess I'll turn it down. I think that's a very common though user experience. But what if you keep the power and still make the mix work? That is what makes me excited. What kind of bold mix are we going to hear on John Mayer's new album? I'm really looking forward to that. And from the songs he chose as references, I'm not only excited about the mix, I'm also excited about the songs themselves. His references are not modern tracks, they were classic rock and classic pop songs. John Mayer's music has stronger roots, and that is why it is so satisfying to listen to. So I already feel like we can expect a sound that the serious music fans will enjoy. At the same time, he also knows how to bring in modern production. In recent years, he collaborated with Zed and showed that he can also fit into a more futuristic sound world. So I'm really curious to hear what kind of songs he is going to give us this time. And personally, I'm not only looking forward to the album, I'm also hoping for a tour. I really hope he comes to Japan. That's all for today.